This car is the most honest car you ever see.
It's been a dream ever since I've had it.
The first time I heard that engine screaming, I thought, I gotta have one of those.
For me, the cars have personality.
What's great about a BMW Classic is the community that surrounds it.
When you listen to that, that's why we're here.
Welcome to Classic Heart, the BMW Group Classic podcast. This is JP, and we have a very fantastic guest today. I can tell you this because we have a long time history compared to a lifespan. And I would like to welcome the head of design of BMW Group, Adrian van Hooydonk. Adrian, how are you today?
Very well, Philip. Hi, good to see you as always.
Today we meet in a very, very special place. It's the BMW's Forschungs- und Innovationszentrum, which means the Research and Innovation Center here in Munich. This is the origin where everything you see on the road with a BMW logo on it, all the stages of development have been done here. And for those who might not know your position, Adrian, what are you doing? What are your responsibilities?
Well, I'm a head of design for BMW Group, and that means that I guess you can say I'm responsible for the look and feel of the products of the BMW brand, the cars and motorcycles, Mini and Rolls-Royce, and also responsible for another team called DesignWorks, which is our industrial design agency, which operates worldwide.
That means DesignWorks, because I think that's very interesting, because many know that the brands of the BMW Group, but DesignWorks is really like a design studio that help other brands in any field to design cool products?
Yes, it is, yeah. They have studios in Shanghai, in Munich, and in Los Angeles. And half of their time they spend working for other clients, other products, not cars or motorcycles. And of course, the other half, they work for us, contributing advanced design or new ideas to the brands of the BMW Group.
Wow, I mean, that's a lot of work, I would say, like lots of responsibilities. Do you have still time to design cars on your own?
I do. I mean, car design or design per se is still my hobby. So I count myself lucky that I'm able to do this job. Yes, you could say it's a lot of work or it's a lot of responsibility, but luckily I don't have to do it on my own. We have a team of about 700 creatives all around the world. So, everything depends on their creativity. And you could say that my job is that of an art director, guiding the design projects towards a specific goal.
I mean, that's a big step in a career, right? I mean, heading one of the most important brands and the design studio. But do you still miss a little bit like the hands-on approach of a designer, of a car designer?
I do and I don't. I mean, obviously, when you start out in doing design, you don't think of becoming a design manager. I never did. I never dreamt of having this position, to be honest. It just happened. I got into design because I loved sketching, and I still do. So in meetings, I still sketch. And part of the way I work is that I sketch and give the designers feedback in that way. So I've never really stopped doing what I love, if you understand what I'm saying.
No, absolutely. But for a non-creative person, and I consider myself not that creative, I have a great team I'm allowed to work with, which are super creative. Where do you get inspiration from?
Inspiration can come from everywhere, really, because my personal interests have always been design at large. So how products are designed, any type of product, really, how products are made. I like also finding out how specific products are produced. Art, modern art is something that I'm very interested in. So when I travel, I always try to visit some modern art museums. I like architecture, fashion, and basically anything that has to do with aesthetics. And that is where my inspiration comes from. And I think this is also true for my team.
But how does a normal working day for you look like? I mean, it's design for sure, but what else comes with the position you're in?
Well, I would say that working day or working week is 99% design. The other percent is some administrative things like budget or other things or planning. But luckily for me, most of it is design. And it works this way that, let's say, every hour of the day, I look at another project. It could be a Rolls-Royce 1 hour, then the next hour a BMW project, next hour a motorcycle, and then a Mini. So what that means is that my working day is quite diverse. So there's never really a boring moment. Of course, it does require, I would say, concentration, because when I look at a project, the team has already put quite some time into it, and they want to discuss with me where to go next. So it's quite intense, but I love it. And like I said, the variety of products is immense, and it really is a pleasure to be able to do that.
I'm surprised that 99% is design, and I really like that answer because I think every normal one would think, okay, you come into a position where there's lots of board meetings, lots of budgetary discussions, as you said. Do you think that especially BMW Group holds you a bit free of that as well compared to other designers? I mean, is there an exchange between the head of designs?
Yes, there used to be more when there were more car shows. We would meet more regularly. Now there is less so. But when we do meet, yes, we do talk not about secrets of our jobs, but a little bit about how things work. If I speak for a BMW Group, my job, I can say that the board meetings that I go to are about design. When I go there, I need to go there because they want a design opinion. So that is about design. There's perhaps only one meeting a week that I have or that I go to, which is more technological in nature, which doesn't necessarily concern me. But I can't go to sleep either because, I have to make sure that if there is something that could concern design, that my voice is heard. But that's why, I think it's true. 99% is design. It has something to do with design. It's not always looking at a sketch. It could be a model, it could be a technical discussion, but it is always working towards better design.
I show you now a pen and a piece of paper. Is that the foundation of every design we see on the roads?
I would say yes, at least it was for me in my generation. Today, I think the pen looks a little different and the piece of paper is a tablet. Most of my design team now sketches digitally. But that doesn't matter. The creative effort is still the same. You are translating your thoughts in your head onto a flat surface. And then later on, and some of our designers can do that too, you turn that into a 3D object. You turn it into a computer model first and a real model later. So you begin to translate your thoughts into 3 dimensions. And that, to most of us, is the most interesting phase, by the way.
I think it would be very nice to learn a bit more about the person Adrian van Hooydonk. So you were born in the Netherlands. I think it's a place called Echt. I hope I pronounce it correctly.
Perfectly, yes.
You see, that's the growing up close to the Dutch border helps a little bit. Did you grow up into an artistic family? Are you the first one going into a creative job?
I would say, no, it was not an artistic environment per se. My father was a doctor. Of course, he always claimed that every aesthetic aspect in my career came from him.
Obviously.
But no, you could say I'm the first one then, from what I know, that went into an artistic profession. Of course, my parents supported that at the time where, let's say, industrial design was not very well known. And that's probably also why I'm here. My father did love cars, though. He loved his cars, like maybe most doctors do. But I think he also liked to drive them just a little bit too fast.
Okay.
But maybe that combined then with other aspects led to me doing this job now.
What would be your first automotive memory? Can you recall that?
Well, I would say my father used to drive some American cars, which were quite, let's say, extrovert.
Yeah.
So that maybe was my first contact. But then, you start reading car magazines at the time. I remember being very impressed by the work that came from Pininfarina. So I know Lorenzo Ramazzotti, of course. And it was the era of, let's say, Ferrari 308, those kind of cars that I find very impressive. My very first cars, though, were French. It was a Peugeot and a Renault 4. Those were my first cars that I had as a student. Yeah.
Renault 4, big revival at the moment.
Yes.
If you find a good one, to everyone that tuned in, buy it, because the French design is in the classic and young-time scene comes now very much. And, speaking about things come together, where did it all start for you? So was it sketching cars? Did you build cars with Lego? How did the fascination for design and lines start?
I can say that I started sketching cars quite early. I think most of my school books were filled with car sketches.
Yeah.
I remember showing them to my parents and saying already back then, look what I'm doing, I want to become a car designer. And like most parents, they were nice and said, yeah. And of course not even I ever imagined that would actually happen.
But when was it like for you manifesting that you want to become a car designer or like a designer? I think we have to say you studied industrial design in Delft.
Yes, yeah. The dream of becoming a car designer came quite early because I loved designs from Italy, Pininfarina, those kind of things. So I was always more into the shape of cars than into the technology. Then you could say I parked that dream for a number of years because growing up and then coming towards graduation, starting to think about what to do next, I stumbled on the study industrial design, which you could do in Holland and in Delft at the Polytechnic at the time. Mm-hmm. And I knew, okay, that is probably not going to lead me to become a car designer, but I was sufficiently interested in design as a whole that I was happy with that. So I started studying industrial design, and let's say I parked the idea of becoming a car designer for that.
And when was the way to the parking lot to reopen that idea?
It happened during my studies in Delft. The dream came back, or it never really went away. And I met someone that you probably also know, Laurens van den Akker.
Yes.
And we basically confessed to one another we had this same dream. So we started already talking then about how could we perhaps do this. We actually ended up doing it. Laurens is now, of course, as you know, head of design for Renault. Our paths were very different and in some ways similar, through Italy, then United States, Germany. And then when I graduated in Delft, I knew, okay, now I probably have to get serious about this dream if I ever want it to come true. And then I wrote to BMW, to Hans Braun, who was then head of design. And I sent him some sketches. And he sent me back a very nice letter, which is why I still answer every letter that I get. But basically what he wrote back to me was, look, he said, Adrian, I see some talent, but BMW is not a school. So if you want to work here, we advise you to either visit the Royal College of Art or Art Center. And I took that advice to heart and went to Art Center. Yeah.
Where you also met a dear friend of ours and also a former guest in our podcast, Gabi van Oppenheim.
Yeah,
right?
Of course,
I think that's where the connection was started, right?
Yes, that's where it started, yeah. And, that was a great time. I only went there for 1 year. And when I graduated, I did get a job offer from BMW. So it worked out as hoped. But it was a little bit of a long-winded way.
Sometimes long ways are the best ones.
Exactly, yeah.
And one thing you mentioned earlier should not be underestimated, that someone in your position takes the time to answer requests, questions that are coming, because it helped and motivated you a lot that you got an answer on a letter. And,
I try, yes.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Did you ever speak to your parents or spoke to your parents about that the dream came true, becoming a car designer?
They saw it happen, luckily. So they know my father passed away, but my mother's still alive and she knows very well what I'm doing. So they saw it come true and they were happy for me. And so it's, I think, altogether a good story. And perhaps not straightforward. And that's what I always say to people that ask me, so how do you do this? There's probably faster ways of doing it. But like you say, it doesn't matter how you get there. It does take some single-mindedness probably and some tenacity.
Yeah.
And then you can make things happen.
Lovely. I think that's a very satisfying non-American way of doing things.
The other things that I would say is that you have to be your own strongest supporter, but also your own strongest critic. Because in order to do design, you have to be also self-critical. But there's a time for that. It's something that I learned while doing an internship in Holland. I had a very good boss there, also a designer, and he told me, don't try to judge your sketch while you're sketching it, because you'll get sort of a shortcut in your brain. Let the creativity flow. Then at the end of the week, put all the sketches on the floor, then look at them, and you will know which one is the best. Because sometimes, I realize designers want to be successful right away. And you shouldn't be thinking about that. You should just be thinking about designing, sketching, and then judge your work at the end of the week, perhaps.
Is this something that you also share with your team? I mean, we spoke about what was around 700 employees.
Yeah.
Is this also that you share this kind of experience also with younger generations of the new and upcoming designers?
I try to. I don't get to talk to them all every day, of course.
Sure.
But yeah, I try to. I try to create some free space for them to think freely. And that's also part of my job. The company will tell me what they need from us in terms of success. Typically, what they want from us is a car that sells in higher numbers than the one before. But that's not necessarily something that serves as an inspiration for the team. So I try to set the design project up in such a way that these things will happen. We have a good chance of success, let's say. But that they don't feel the pressure. They feel free to be creative.
As you said, let the creativity flow and afterwards judge the work.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. For someone who's the user of your product, how could they imagine that the design process started? You just touched it briefly, so you get a briefing from, I think, engineers, marketing, or whatever. What are the steps?
Yeah, very briefly. I mean, the briefing today is written, let's say, together with engineers and marketeers. So it's not something that just falls on our doormat. So we're able to also influence the briefing. And then, of course, if we are talking about a car, let's say like an X5, which we have done several times before, then perhaps the new car doesn't really change character so much. It just has to be transported into the future. Maybe there is some technological aspects that are very new. Maybe there's some new things that we've learned that we want to incorporate into the car. But the briefing to the team can be, let's say, a meeting of an hour or hour and a half, where we talk about the previous car and how it did, what people like, what people would like to see us improve. Basically, it could be a one-pager of that sums it all up. And then we set the team off, sketching, designing, for about, let's say, 3 weeks or so. Then we look at all these sketches, we select some to be worked out for another 2 weeks or so. And then we begin to make some models, first in the computer and then in reality. So at the end of that first phase, the creative phase, which is about 3-4 months, we begin to look at some models, 3 or 4 models on the computer screen. We might also mail them. And then 3 months later, we have refined those models and we go to the board of management with 3 models, show them the state of the project. We begin also to already select. We go down maybe from 3 to 2 models. And then 6 months later, we make the final selection. And then we continue working on the chosen model, chosen exterior, chosen interior. And I would say altogether this whole process, coming down to one chosen design for the exterior and the interior, takes about a year and a half, roughly. And then again, we build a model. This time it looks like a real car. So the interior that we chose and the exterior that we chose are now built together into one single model, all hand-built within our design team. And that gets shown to the board again. And then we ask for final approval.
Yeah.
And if we get that, which we typically do, then the whole industrial process starts of making this car in the factory and build prototypes, testing it. And that whole process of developing a car, designing and developing a car, nowadays takes about 3 years, 3.5 years.
Wow. Yeah. That means you have to really live in the future.
We try to, yes, because right now, as we sit here, we are working on projects for the year 25, 26.
Yeah.
And that is then the launch date for those new products. And we have to make the design decisions for those projects now, this year. Then they come out in 26 and they stay in the market for another 8 years. So we are deciding on designs this year, and it has to be still relevant in the market in 2033 or something like this. So yes, we have to at least be able to look ahead 10, 15 years, I would say.
I mean, but I think that's a super interesting fact, because doesn't this gives you sleepless nights to think about what's going to be liked by the consumer in 3 to 5 years?
Sleepless nights, no, but it is certainly the hardest part of our job, because who can predict the future?
Yeah.
That is almost impossible. Certainly in times like these, where life seems to speed up in all aspects, certainly in technology. So it's very hard to predict, for example, what a mobile phone will look like in 15 years from now, or what Apple products will look like then, or how we will go to work back then. It's very hard to imagine at this point in time. Still, I believe that designers have very fine antenna for even small changes that are beginning to happen in society. Typically, even big changes don't happen overnight. If you're very perceptive, then you see these changes coming. You feel that it's coming.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we don't have to predict what is going to happen for all brands in the whole world, just for the brands that we take care of. And so far, we've managed it. But it is indeed the hardest part of our job. Yeah.
I love that part. I think that's besides all the creativity and creating something, I really think that's absolutely something that makes your profession so special, or like any designer's profession so special, that you guys really, I would say, I said live in the future, but predict the future.
Yeah, a large part, I would say, is also taking a decision, taking a stance, because you simply cannot know for sure. So if you wait and you want to be absolutely sure, you will never finish. And I think in the time that we live in now, the risk of not changing enough is far greater than the risk of changing too much. Because the world, like I said, is changing very rapidly now.
Do you see also, I mean, so since when are you with BMW? When was your first project?
1992.
Okay.
1st of November. It's a long time.
That's like a jubilee. Was last year.
It was last year.
Yeah,
yes.
fantastic. Yeah. Belated congrats to that.
Thank you very much. You're the first one actually to congratulate.
You see? But my question was actually leading to the fact, like since 1992, we see that circles of digital developments or developments in general are getting shorter and shorter. We see that iPhones come now out every 2 or 3 years instead of 4 years or whatever. So does this affect also your work?
Yes, our development times have been shortened, almost halved.
Yeah.
Yes, like you say, that's true. Luckily for us, the design part has not been shortened that much. A little bit, yes. Let's say 12 months is still what we've got, and that's not that much shorter than we used to have. The tools that we use, of course, are far more digital now, which does mean that in certain periods we can do things faster. But I always feel that design is something that requires time to think, requires time to reconsider, to let it sit, come back to it the next day. So it's something, in theory, you could do it in 3 months. And sometimes for a concept car, we do that, or we have done that. That can lead to good results for a concept car because it needs to be very spontaneous and all emotion. For a production car, I would not advise doing that. I think 12 months is okay.
Yeah.
Then the time that the products spend in the market, we are actually extending it for various reasons. We think that probably it makes sense not to shorten the life cycle so much. We want to become circular. That means we want to use as many materials as we can from older cars to make the new ones.
Yeah.
And actually extending the lifespan helps, because otherwise these circles become too short.
And how important is legacy? I mean, while designing a Rolls-Royce or a new BMW or a motorbike or a new Mini, I mean, the brands are countless and cool. How important is legacy? So does design history plays a big role?
Yes, to me it does. I think it gives you authenticity. So if BMW talks about a sporty and elegant car, I think our customers know that we've not just invented that yesterday.
Yeah.
We've been doing this for many decades now. They look different maybe 50 years ago because the definition of sporty elegance has changed over time. Rolls-Royce is about effortless motoring, and it has always been about that. So I think legacy or history gives you authenticity. It helps you also figure out who you are, what the DNA is. Just the way you express it, I guess, also needs to change over time because everything else around you changes too.
I remember that you were kindly joining a discussion round at the Munich Drivers and Business Club. And someone in the audience was asking the questions, of course, about the big kidney and all these kind of things, and all design elements, Hofmeister, kink, and all the things. And what you said is really stuck into my mind. I hope I repeat it correctly, because you said, if these design elements are the thing that makes a BMW, we made something wrong, because you will certainly understand the BMW if you see it on the road, even though without seeing the front or the back.
I would say that it's not just the grille or the lamps or Hofmeister kink that make a BMW. It is about proportion, it is about precision, it's about treatment of surface and lines. I do have a lot of respect for previous generations of BMWs. I love them. I own some of them, as you know. So we will always want to take great care of it. Having said that, though, we believe that in order to move forward, you can't just keep repeating what has been in the past. You have to sometimes add new elements to it. And sometimes that also means changing some of the iconography.
No, I mean, that's sometimes a bit of the issue for someone who has to work with a design element like a 911. I mean, a car that has, let's face it, recently not have changed a lot, if I may say so, because it was very successful, so they need to keep it.
I think it really depends on the brand and on the specific product. If I look at our Mini brand, for example, the core Mini, you could say, is a car like the 911. It's a car that we want to develop carefully. Around it, we have created a whole family of completely new products.
Yes.
And with all of that, I think now Mini is more successful than it ever was. We're selling Mini cars in countries that never knew the original. So it shows you that it's possible. But with such an iconic core car, like the core Mini, for 45 years, the Mini brand was just one car. So that tells you something. So that's why we developed that very carefully. Now in Munich at the IAA, we will launch the latest version. With BMW, there's far more cars that have become iconic. And I think it's a brand that develops rapidly in terms of technology. So there we feel that the speed of change can be perhaps even a little higher.
It's the global thing. Globalization affects everything, also car design, I would assume.
It does, and I travel to these places quite often. I've been to China this year. We have, of course, a design studio in Shanghai. We have one in LA. The idea about the BMW brand all over the world is actually pretty similar. When I was in Shanghai Motor Show this year, I showed a concept car there called BMW Vision Neue. And some very young journalists came up to me and said, "Look, doesn't that look a little bit like the BMW 2002? And I think that's a fair point. But what surprised me was that she actually knew this car, but because that car was never on sale in China, ever. In the United States, everybody knows the 2002. So it shows you that, like you say, in this communication world that we now live in, news travels fast and information is available everywhere. So I think it's a good thing that for us actually in design, that the idea or the basic concept of the BMW brand is the same the world over. Still though, there are some country-specific flavors that you can add to it. But typically when we do a design for any of our brands, we design them for the whole world.
You mentioned the 2002. I would like to go one step earlier, back to the 60s. There was a nice article about new kind of cars BMW were presenting in motor car for the American market that says BMW in happiness. And I think it showed that the, at that time, Neue Klasse was really a success also in the States. And I mean, the States were already a very important market, were an emerging market for BMW. But it seems that the Neue Klasse was the real game changer. Why was the Neue Klasse, which is called like the new class, or do we say Neue Klasse because we stick to this? Why was it so special in your opinion?
Well, if you read the history books, I was too young to know firsthand, then you'll know that in the early 60s, BMW was nearly bankrupt. The reason was the products, while being interesting and beautiful, were not sold in high numbers. BMW was making an Isetta, small car, which was successful initially, but at that time less so. Then the other cars that they were making was 507, 508, and a big V8 limousine, which in German they call Barockengel.
Yes.
And there was nothing in between. So sales were quite low. And then BMW started creating Neue Klasse with the BMW 1500. Then that turned into the 1800. It became an instant success because that was exactly the kind of car that people in that time were craving for. A compact, sporty, elegant limousine. And as we now know, it set BMW on the course of success that it is still on today.
And do you know the history about the name Neue Klasse? So who came up with that?
I guess the marketing colleagues at the time came up with that because the car was simply labeled BMW 1500. Yeah. Then I think after a year or two at the IAA in Frankfurt at the time, BMW introduced the 1800 and began to call it Neue Klasse because they began to see the potential of this vehicle. And it was all new, of course, for them in terms of technology, or a combination perhaps of elements, a certain sportiness, compactness, elegance that was new to the market as a whole. So I guess that's why they were brave enough to call it Neue Klasse. No.
They filled a niche which was not filled, that you have like a sporty, compact, elegant as well, sporting, elegant car in that sense. But I mean, I really like it. And also like that all my American friends, and I see like a big demand, not only for 2002s, they were always like strong, like over like since I'm working in the classic sphere, so 25 years ago. But now I see people really buying, and we had also guests in our podcast who were modifying a 2000, modifying a 1500. And I love to see these cars coming back on the road because they were, at least in Europe, they were a bit neglected at a certain point in the classic community. Yeah. And now you see them coming back, which I really find interesting because it's such an important car in the younger BMW history. Is it actually true that the first design studies talking about design elements were presented without the BMW kidney?
I would say it was a different interpretation of a BMW kidney, fairly wide and low slung. And yes, in the course of the design phase, they added some more elements to it. So you could say it's almost a grille within a grille than how the car came out. What it also initiated, let's say, was sort of a visual connection between the headlamps and the grille. And that is something that we still do today in the 3 Series, a strong visual connection between lamps and grille. And that is something that, of course, we're looking at also for the future.
Future is a very good keyword, actually, because next week there will be the IAA, the International Automotive Show in Munich. So that means there will be a world premiere of the BMW Vision Neue Klasse. I mean, we're allowed to talk about this sensation now, as this podcast will be released after the IAA. But may I ask, why is BMW presenting the Neue Klasse again in 2023? Or let's say their vision of the Neue Klasse 2023. Is everything starting all over again?
It is not because we want to do retro design. Let me say that first. The reason why we are talking about Neue Klasse again is because we think that back then in the 60s, Neue Klasse was a very important moment in time for the company. It was also a new page in the book of BMW design. And we feel that what we are showing now at IAA with Neue Klasse could be that again. A new page in the history of BMW design, certainly a big step in terms of technology. And yet I believe that it is very much a BMW. Everything is new, all the aspects of the design are new, but I think it's very true to the BMW DNA. And it could, we hope at least, become again a stepping stone for success in the next decades.
I mean, that's very exciting. So can you just share some elements you really love on that car? Or the things that for you make this thing very special?
Well, the new Neue Klasse, of course, is electric, it is digital, and it is circular. So those are the key elements of the car. In terms of design, I think it's very clean. So you can probably tell it's a zero-emission vehicle. I do believe it has a very dynamic stance, very BMW typical proportions, 2.5 box design. I think it sits well on its wheels. So it does look dynamic even when it's standing still. And it's doing that, I would say, with very few lines, almost effortless. Then when you sit inside the car, you feel like the driving is important. Yeah. And it always has been to us in BMW. We love driving, all of us do. And that meant in the past that the cockpit had many switches and was, curved around you. In the new Neue Klasse, we show a new interpretation of what we call driver orientation. It is now very intelligent, very digital. We project most of the information into the windscreen. Mm-hmm. And that helps you actually focus on the road. Hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, that's our mantra. So we believe it is very true to the core beliefs of BMW, driving sensation, dynamic stance even when standing still. And yet in terms of design, surface, lines, very clean, very new.
We're excited to then finally see the car. And thank you very much for taking on that travel of a maybe future classic. We will see. Maybe in 25 years. I'm not sure if we're still around in the positions we are, but maybe we talk about this.
I'll keep reading Classic Driver and looking out for it as long as I can.
That's thank you very much. I hope that we're going to be around another 25 years. Let's see what future will bring. And what the future will bring, you should Google, because you should have a look at the Vision Neue Klasse if you have not seen it. And I mean, it shows so much how design can influence a whole industry. And I remember looking back in our 25-year history, Adrian, I remember that we worked on a very interesting project together. We means you, the design of BMW Group, and a Classic Driver, because you asked if we would have fun in doing a storytelling about a long-lost project, the BMW Garmisch. What does the Garmisch concept mean to you?
The BMW Garmisch, to me, takes a special place, at least in my view, on BMW's design history, because it was a show car designed by Marcello Gandini in his time at Bertone, and I hold Marcello in very high regard. He's one of the most inspiring creative designers that I know. And that's why this car was so intriguing to me. The problem was, though, that I'd never seen it in real life. The car had disappeared. It was gone. We didn't have it in our museum or in our storage facilities. All we had was like 4 or 5 photos of it. So then I had the crazy idea, perhaps, to recreate it, because I felt, it should be in our collection. It should be something that people could look at. So the first thing that I did was I contacted you guys and then told you guys about this idea. You, luckily for me, told me it was perhaps not so crazy. And then we went to visit Mr. Gandini. He said it was a crazy idea, but he liked it. He said, if you're crazy enough to want to do this, then by all means. I needed his help though, because the pictures alone were not enough to recreate it. And we then, together with our modeling team, his help, his memories, we actually managed to recreate the car. And it was originally built on the chassis of a 2002. And that's what we did. We bought a 2002 Italian registered, and we recreated the car all over again. And now it's part of our museum collection. As you know, we then showed it at Villa d'Este together with Mr. Gandini. And it was very moving, very, very emotional, I think, for both of us. And it's one of those small things that you perhaps don't need to do, but I think in some ways we owe it to our history and to a great designer like Marcello Gandini.
Yeah. I mean, it's money and effort and time. I mean, that's something, as we said, time is restrained. And to going that path in honoring someone who has so much influence on our car designs until today, I think I love that. And also to complete like a missing link in a BMW history. And if you look at the car, you know, no one will guess that it's built on a 2002 because it looks like a size of a 5 Series in a sense, like a big 5 Series coupe, I would say. And but I mean, okay, you had the help of Mr. Gandini, but you just had the photos. There were no building plans, nothing, right?
No, there were just some faded pictures. And one of the hardest parts of the process became to actually get the color right.
Yeah.
Because from the faded picture, we couldn't really know. Mr. Gandini didn't remember what color it was exactly or where they purchased it. So we had to sort of mix that color again. Then the pictures were taken somewhere in Turin, and we couldn't quite figure out where it was. But then when we were building the model, one of the model makers remembered the project and said, I know where this is. And he took us to that very spot where the picture was taken. So we even recreated the picture at that very location.
Amazing.
So altogether, it was a very, very nice adventure, a very rewarding project. It just goes to show, I guess, how much we care about design in BMW Group, how much we respect our history. And while we do want to move the design forward into the future in our production cars, we feel strong enough about our heritage to do a project like this.
And what was the reaction when you pitched it first? I mean, someone has to finance it. I don't think that you went out and get some donations, I would say.
Next question.
Okay, good, very much. I thought so.
Let's say it took all my persuasive powers.
Yes.
And I would like to keep that a secret of how you do these things for a while.
And I love that there have to be some secrets out there. That makes it even more magical sitting here in the Forschungs- und Innovationszentrum, I would say. Let's keep it like that. So I think we touched all interesting points that really shows a bit of your personality, a bit of your daily life in terms of your profession and your job. And I would like to thank you for allowing us to have a little peek into the life of the head of the design of the BMW Group, Adrian van Hooydonk. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
I would also take the opportunity to thank the whole team around it. So there's Philip for the sound. We have Scenario Studio, who does everything, make it look good at the end. We have Federica, who helps us from editorial, and Robin, who is the good heart of it because he holds all the ends together. And if you like what you hear, do us a favor and leave us a high star rating or some comments. And to never miss another episode of Classic Heart, please subscribe to the podcast service of your choice. Thank you very much. It's hard to say bye-bye, but only those who say bye-bye can say hello once again. Thank you very much, Adrian van Hooydonk.
Thank you. My pleasure, Philip.